So I finally feel comfortable to tell this story. This happened a little while ago, but for the longest time, it has been like a huge amount of anxiety and like PTSD from this moment. But I wanted to tell the story about how I nearly lost my client $5 million worth of business in one day. And kind of the hope of me telling the story is I want to be able to help people learn a couple lessons out of this and also realize that mistakes happen, but this was kind of a big one. First of all, the question might be like, who am I? So I'm a senior software engineer that has been a freelancer for the past like 5 years. And currently, my current role is I'm maintaining like some older systems that are running the business. People call them legacy, but they're like running the business. They're older ones that people don't really want to mess with. So like I am there to fix bugs, to upgrade things, and just like keep the business running. Essentially, that's the main role, is just keep the business running with some of this outdated software. And for this business, so one of the main things, like especially in software engineering, is that like you don't have all of the software running like when you're visiting the website. You want some of it to be processing kind of in the background. So like you have a background job, a job runner of some sort. Now for this client, they kind of abstracted that out so that the job runner had its own like application and it was just running the jobs outside of the main platform. So if we think about this in architecture, hopefully I can get a visual for you, is that the platform that is running the business is where people can log in, they can get their data, and they can just go about their business and try to close more sales, right? And for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to call this the job cannon. This is the application that is running all the background jobs. So any that's like heavy processing of data, like integrating with third-party systems, that's kind of what this does. So it sits there, it runs background jobs, it orchestrates them, sends the data back to platform, pulls the data from third-party systems, and also just makes sure that things are running in the background versus like holding up anything that may be running the business when they're just visiting the main website, right? And so the project of mine was in Job Cannon, I needed to upgrade some of the software. And that involved not only the application code that runs on the database, but also the database itself. So the job table basically needed a couple updates. So when it comes to stuff like that, especially with the database, you're going to have to like slot in some maintenance time so that you can upgrade this outside of work hours. So you're not like bringing everything to a screeching halt at work. Because this was like a business critical part of the system, I wanted to make sure that I was checking every single box. I was doing my due diligence. I was making sure that I upgraded the software. I had it running locally, made all of the test suite pass for my local development, make sure the unit tests are updated, make sure that the database is running and performing the actions that we needed to locally. And that is just phase one. So phase two, I also wanted to make sure that I am pushing out to staging. So staging is going to be like as prod-like as possible. It has kind of sanitized production data, but it has a better sense of like what it's going to be like working in prod. So when I push it out there, I put it into staging and I tried a bunch of new things. I tried to run every single job so that like kind of every use case is covered. So that was part, and that caused me to find a couple bugs here and there, but that's what staging is for. If it breaks there, that's fine. I can pull it back and update the code. This process lasted a while. So I did like 2 or 3 iterations of like going to staging, bringing it back, updating the code, and going back and forth, making sure that I always had also a fail-safe to be able to roll back in case things went wrong. So after working with several other engineers, we figured out that we have tried all the use cases. We have gone through any sort of situation where this new code will be used, and we're ready for a deploy. So we decided on a deploy for Friday night, which if anyone has been in the industry long enough, they realize that Friday deploys is probably a bad idea. We thought it was a good idea. It was late so that we can have maybe the next day, Saturday, to fix anything that might come up. So that's what we did. So me and this one other engineer, we got online 7 p.m. on a Friday and we deployed the code. I ran the data migrations to make sure that all the existing jobs could move over and use the new format and we can just move on with our lives. We pushed it. We found an error or two. We were able to fix that, just fixing some of the data. We ran through all the jobs in production on a test account so that we can make sure that what we saw in staging can still happen in prod. And after that, everything seemed to go super smoothly. I monitored for another hour or so, making sure that nothing delayed, caught fire. And we said, good job, this is great. We'll see you on Monday. So here's the problem though. Here is the twist. When I explained the architecture earlier, I wasn't being 100% honest. The platform is using Job Cannon for a lot of this work, but I did not share with you earlier the volume that we run through the Job Cannon. Job Cannon not only touches maybe one third-party system, it touches about 6, and 2 of those systems, those 2 third-party systems, are ingesting a bunch of data for Job Cannon to process and then send off. This data is processed every couple hours, and these jobs are run constantly. So we have to make sure that everything is running smoothly. Now you may be wondering, like, what could have gone wrong? Well, a lot went wrong. So I come into work on Monday. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast, and all of a sudden we're getting reports that the entire system is down. The business has ground to a halt, which is a terrible thing to hear because you worry that like maybe it was me, maybe it was my fault, maybe it was the code that we pushed out. And it was 100% our problem, my problem. And the idea of rolling back at this point became too difficult to do so because the problem grew and grew over the weekend. That's mistake number 3, is that we did not monitor over the weekend to see if anything went worse after just the initial deploy. And on Monday morning, Job Cannon had backed up jobs that went up to 1,200,000 jobs that have yet to be processed, completely locking up the database and any sort of data that went through this. Now, that sounds horrendous, but thank God, it's just data being processed. That's another thing I did not kind of mention. The platform that's reaching out to Job Cannon, there are other kind of jobs that go through there. And one job in particular is processing contracts. So inside of that 1.2 million jobs that are backed up, somewhere in there is about 50 to 100 contracts. Each of these contracts account for $50 to $150 to sometimes $250,000 in revenue, and they can no longer be processed. So immediately my heart sinks. I don't know what to do. And we turn into this giant war room where just checking logs and looking through everything that could have been wrong. One of the first things is that we notice that some new errors are popping up. And so I'm able to hotfix and send out some new code so that the only way that we could fix this was to fix forward. That was the only way because of the backup of jobs. So there was no simple rollback because over the weekend, we collected over 7 figures of jobs backed up. So then we get to about lunchtime. About lunchtime, I was not eating. I was just completely glued to my chair. And I was able to push out 2 or 3 hotfixes, fixing a couple of the bugs that were not seen in staging. So I was able to get 1.2 million down. Maybe I took it down another 60,000 jobs because I was able to alleviate some of the bugs. Some ones that were stuck, I fixed those, 60,000 jobs down. The problem is every 2 hours, the data processing jobs that are coming in that we do not have control of, whether or not they come into our system, every 2 hours, at least 200,000 jobs come in and process through this system. So even though I was able to alleviate 60,000 jobs, 200,000 every 2 hours would come up. So around lunch and a little bit in the afternoon, we're up to 2.1 million jobs, of which we're not sure which ones are the data processing, which one are the contracts. And because there's so many jobs, the database is completely seized up. So even if we found the contract jobs, we couldn't just say, hey, prioritize this, do this next, because everything was locked up. There was timeouts, there was no reading or writing to the database. So even a simple query to be saying, hey, what is the count for how many jobs we have in this table? That would take 5 to 6 minutes, which is insane. So the day continues, and we're still in this war room for at 8 to 9 hours at this point. And there's a couple other bugs that we're fixing. I not only was doing that, I was trying to scale up vertically, getting some stronger machines to help process. And then at one point, I even did a live swap to a more beefier database so that we can help process the jobs faster and clear the cache of what is processing now and hopefully alleviate some of the jobs. That was still able to take it down 100K, but then a new data would come in, 200,000 jobs, completely erasing any sort of gains I had. So in the evening, it got to 3 million jobs that were backed up. And the last thing that we noticed, and some of you database experts out there may already notice, but one thing that I was not aware of, that when, and this is for someone, this is for anyone who is like messing around with the database, how like important it is to deeply know your database and how it's set up. If you make a migration to change the database in any sort of way, if you're changing a column to be a different type and you're migrating stuff, if there were indices that used that column that you are changing, the indices are blown away. So any sort of index you had to speed up the database for this job processing doesn't work anymore. There's no index to help it move faster. So because I migrated and changed the entire job database, every single index, about 7 of them, were completely wiped away, and the entire database came to a crippling halt because of the speed of processing just went completely out the window. So I upgraded the database, I made it a stronger database, and I recreated all of the indices that were used for that column, and basically threw my hands up. I said, Jesus, take the wheel. Hopefully we can get this done. I'm too tired. I'm gonna have to wake up in the morning and see how this happened. At this point, at 2 a.m., it was 3.5 million jobs were backed up, and business had done absolutely nothing for an entire workday on a Monday. So of course the next morning I wake up in a cold sweat, just freaking out that I don't know if I have a job anymore. I don't know if I'm gonna get sued by my client. I woke up 4 hours later and checked all the logs and checked the database, and I was happy to find out that we went from 3 million jobs down to 60,000 jobs. So that's how important indices are for your database, especially making sure that nothing gets completely locked up because of slow queries. So not only did I learn a lot like in the moment, but I think this is a big lesson for anyone in tech or any sort of like software role, is that you need to do all of your due diligence, even if it seems like a slam dunk. Just carefully step all through the way, and even if you check every box. I went through 3 or 4 different testing patterns before I went to production for this, and everything still just fell apart. There are still situations, there's still times where things can blow up in your face. And the most important thing is to kind of stay calm during this. Things like this have happened to me, like in a production environment where I'm trying to save data and the business money. And had I freaked out and just given up and thrown up my hands, then this problem would never have been fixed. But because I was able to sit down and have a war room with the people I work with to carefully go through what was the problem, how can we fix it, what can we do with the tools, we were able to fix it in one business day. Now, the scary part is that all those contracts did end up getting processed. We didn't lose any business because of it, but the opportunity of losing that data was so close. No matter how many backups and sort of redundancies you have, when it comes to real business, you're worried that this data could just go poof, especially when a system is redlining across the board. By the way, if this is the content that you guys like, please let me know down in the comments. Also, I have a newsletter in the description where I want to share more of a written form of this kind of content, of like lessons learned throughout my horrendous career in software. If you're interested in that, go check it out, and everything's in the description. So that's the end of my story. And no, I did not get fired, but I definitely felt like I could have been for at least a week because of how badly things went. But we didn't lose any business. Everything came back online, and we were able to fix it, to solve it. I have a morbid love for these kind of stories, so please let me know any sort of incident that you've run into in the past, and I will always respond to all comments. But thanks for listening to me, guys. Tell me what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, see ya.